Welcome to HR Studio Podcast. Through bi-weekly interviews with HR executives, thought leaders, authors, speakers, and trend spotters from the world of HR and beyond, we invite you to listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a trusted human capital consulting partner to emerging, mid-market, and world-class organizations. To learn more, visit us at ajoconnor.com.
Welcome, everyone, to HR Studio Podcast. I'm Denise Yostafat, your host for today's episode. Over the next 25 minutes, we're going to explore the topic of the impact of stress on organizational performance and how company leaders, in HR in particular, can best deal with it. Joining us for this lively conversation is Charles Fred, who is a best-selling author, serial entrepreneur, and 2019 chair of the Association for Talent Development. He has devoted nearly 4 decades of his life to discovering new ways for professionals to acquire the skills necessary to compete in industries undergoing major transformations. He's a pioneer in the e-learning industry, and his best-selling book, Breakaway, is credited with introducing a new framework for organizational learning. And now, his latest book, The 24-Hour Rule, Leading in a Frenetic World, presents research allowing the impact of stress on organizational development and how quickly stress can spread when enabled with technology. It also introduces the discipline of pause as a required leadership competency. So I am so excited to talk to you today, Charles, and hopefully we won't pause, though, during the interview.
That wouldn't be good. No.
That would be good. That would be good.
Later. Yeah.
So tell me about your latest book. You did a lot of research on the impact of stress on organizational performance. Let's start with some of your findings.
Yes, Denise, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for thinking that this might be important to your listeners. I think I would like to start maybe by getting people's attention based on our research. So in conjunction with a national research firm, we've been able to assess, it's called ethnography. It's a form of anthropology. We've studied 4,000 companies over the last 6 years. These are organizations that are not startups. They're also not giant companies. They're mid-sized businesses. And we've been able to look at performance. And with the data set that we have, we've been able to connect poor performing companies over that period of time to those organizations that have high levels of stress in their organization. So why would you think we could collect this information? So let me describe that really quickly. Over that period of time, we have done every exit interview for unplanned turnover in a data set of 4,000 companies. You can imagine how thousands. We do this with an AI engine, by the way, by recording those people. And we can see a distinct pattern in poor performance and stress. And the reason people were leaving is because of stress. We've talked about people leave because they leave their manager. I wouldn't say that's actually true based on the data we have. They're actually leaving because they can't think straight. They're so stressed out that it's constraining their thinking and their creativity, and it extends into the family. So the essence of the 24-hour rule that we have is really, what do we do about this? How do we help companies that are so constrained and constricted with stress today? How do we help them move forward? So that's what I'd like to talk to your audience about today, because I think it's a really relevant topic.
Well, it's interesting because you said that the myth is that it's their manager that causes them to leave, but it's really all about stress. But is there a link? Is there the manager causing stress, or do you find any linkages there?
It's such a perfect question, because that's what we wanted to figure out. Is that we wanted to try to figure out the cause. So let me see if I can tell you a quick story about the infectious nature of stress. For those of your listeners that might remember Typhoid Mary, the unfortunate, her name was Mary Mallon. She was an Irish immigrant that moved to the United States at the turn of the 19th century, and she was credited, unfortunately, infamously, with spreading typhoid fever. And she did that mostly because she was a cook and she would cook and people would eat her food and she'd get typhoid. So we know that because it's called infection. You get an infection from a person and their. But there's a process in stress called the contagion effect that has a very similar influence. And stress is very similar to the sensation you have when you see somebody yawn, you want to yawn. It's the same thing that happens in your brain. So we know that stress is wildly infectious across an organization. Think about the last time you may have gone into a meeting where one person was highly stressed out and they were playing in that way and everybody walks out of the room stressed. Well, the problem we have, the difference between Mary Mallon and typhoid fever is that you had to be next to her to get it or eat her food. With technology today, you can spread it across the entire globe at 2 a.m. in the morning. You don't even have to be there to spread stress. So why is this important for your audience? Because we believe the person that creates that stress is usually the person that has the most influence over the organization. It starts there. So we think we've isolated the spreaders and the creators of stress, and it's the leaders of an organization, and they need to start thinking about this.
So if it's the leaders of the organization, and there's an example. I have a client who has been with a new company for just a few months and is already stressed out.
Yes.
As the leaders of the organization who want reports and who want, done yesterday kind of thinking, aren't giving a lot of time to the individual to know what they want, and then they procrastinate and it's last minute and then everything's wrong. It's the kind of things that cause a lot of stressors.
Yes.
So how can we affect those leaders to think differently and act differently?
I think the first thing is to be aware. I want everybody to know from our research that we did not find a pattern of malice. We didn't see people purposely or maliciously spreading stress through the organization. And that's a really important thing for everybody to know. But it's like being the lead dog in a sled. The lead doesn't see what's happening behind that. And leaders will spread stress and they don't have a feedback mechanism to find out what's happening with that. And they can create and amplify things. So a great example would be an impetuous leader that might be upset at night, late in the evening, and send a text or an email to an employee or a direct report. And they go to bed and sleep just fine. And yet they set in motion throughout an organization. They amplify stress where people are not only losing sleep, they're stressed out, they're thinking about it, they wake up that way, their family is infected. And the leader gets up and has a great day and doesn't have any clue of what they had just created. And so when we get to the point maybe of this presentation or this talk today about what to do about it, I think the first thing you've got to do is be wildly aware of your influence as a leader and what it means in the organizations today.
So a lot of times organizations will bring in executive coaches.
Yes.
To help the leaders understand what their impact is on an organization and how to maximize their potential and create an organization that's highly successful. And so stress comes up sometimes. But for those who don't have the benefit of someone pointing it out, how can they become more self-aware? What can they do to understand the stress that they're causing?
Again, I think if you're unaware of it, you're not paying attention. I think the first thing that we saw is this connection between unplanned turnover and the leaders that were leading that organization. Turnover in this environment today is deadly to an organization because it's so hard to find top talent in the first place. So leaders should first, if that's going on in their organization, they need to start looking at their own behaviors first. Before they start looking at compensation, benefits, and others, they should look at their own behaviors. The lion's share of the exit interviews that we did, remember these are in the thousands of exit interviews, compensation, benefits were on the very bottom of the reasons these people were leaving. So much of it had to do with the fact that they didn't think that they could perform their best there anymore. And I think that's something that's maybe shifted in what's happening across organizations today, where the tolerance, for example, in particular, the millennial members of an organization will not tolerate this for long periods of time, where my generation may have tolerated it for much longer. So So I think the first thing you got to do is be aware of it. I think after you're aware of it, step number 2 is to let people know that you're aware of it. This was a really important thing when we worked through coaching networks. I'm really glad you brought that up, because we're trying to arm coaches today, knowing that stress may be number 1 or number 2 on the list, and they need to look around the organization, not just with the person they're coaching. So put in place something that says, I'm going to be aware of it. I'm going to do some things differently. When we get to the topic of pause today, I really want to talk about that. But let people know. I realize I'm stressing you all out as an example, and here are the things I'm going to do, and give me some feedback of whether it's working or not. And literally have people tell you that worked or that didn't, and start some new behaviors, some new things. I will tell you right off the bat, you will de-stress your organization the second you let people know that you're aware that you're stressing them out. It's unbelievable how that de-stresses the organization. They're going, Denise has been stressing me out. She finally realizes it. And it's like, I feel better already. So.
And taking steps to de-stress.
Yes, exactly. And to be aware of it. So that's some of the first, those are some of the first pieces we have to get through.
Right. Well, it seems that stress today, in today's world, has seemed to accelerate. It has seemed to have been accelerated with technology, because you mentioned the example of the quick email or the quick text at 2 a.m. In the 1950s, there was no such thing, right? People slept, and then the next day that they came in and they did their job. So tell us a little bit about the implications of technology on stress.
It's undeniable. You look at the advancements of speed of information and texting and tweeting, and just the kind of this narrative that we've unfortunately accepted. We've almost become accustomed to it. However, our data doesn't suggest that technology is the problem. And I want to make sure that your listeners hear me straight on this one. It's so easy to blame your phone that's sitting in front of you, yet you're the one picking it up and tweeting or texting or emailing. What we suggest, and the reason we wrote this booklet, this monograph, in the way in which we did, is pause is a discipline. And you've got to develop leadership discipline before you start blaming it on all the devices and technology and things that are around you. It's up to you to put your phone down for a few minutes. And that's why we talk about pauses. If you can do this in 5 seconds or 24 hours, as long as you get mental clarity before you respond or react to others. We didn't talk about this, but in the book that we write about, I just have this belief that we are in complete control of one thing in our life. There's so many things out of our control, but you're in complete control of how you react and respond to others. Nobody else is in control of that. Your phone isn't, your device isn't, your friends aren't. You're in control of that. And if you can get control of that with the discipline, you will change your life, and you'll change especially the lives for those that work with you.
So it's interesting that you talk about that control, which I absolutely believe in. A lot of people feel that when they have really high emotions, that they are more out of control. I need it now. I need it. It's that
Yes.
kind of intense reaction that's almost irrational at points. So
Yes.
how do we help rein in those emotions or that control when people are feeling those high intense emotions?
Yeah, I think, again, what we see, unfortunately, are models of entrepreneurs and famous people where they don't have things in control, and they're better at apologizing than they are at pausing. I don't really have the perfect answer for you. I'm certainly not a scientist around psychology and things like that. As I write in my book, which is maybe important for readers, I've got this really unique thing, and that is for the last 35 years, I've kept a daily journal. A daily journal. I've only missed about 200 days. I have 12,000 pages of my journal. And the one thing that, if I look at the patterns of what I've journaled over those years, since I use it actually as a learning device, I can see all the times that I tried to control things that I couldn't control: the environment, the world, the economy, friends, all those things, right? But there was one pattern that I had, and that is that I could control how I responded and reacted to others. I just had to decide to do it and to do something about it. So what I'd ask people to do, especially those that have an influence over others, you could be a head of a PTA, you could be a coach, you could be a leader, you could just be the head of the family. find a way to pause before you cause damage when it comes to stress. And know that if you don't, you're causing painful stress that in some cases determines people's sleeping at night and others. So take charge, take ownership for it, maybe is my big message.
So I love the fact of taking ownership. How do we pause? How do we, what are some strategies we can do to pause? Is it a written thing? Is it, do we just mentally change our mindset? What's involved?
Yeah, I think, so we didn't put a prescription in the book. So I want you to know that, 6 years of my life have been evolved around a little bit of this now that we've discovered this. And so it's amazing the brainstorming we've had in small and large groups and audiences. My association with the talent development organization, ATD, has given me great fodder to just ask people what's the best mechanisms for that. And you get this range. You get the range from meditation, physical exercise, things that people do, literally devices, symbols, all kinds of things. So we knew that there wouldn't be 5 things you should do because humans are like snowflakes. We're all different. You've got to figure that out for yourself based on your own personality. But what I would do is I'd set back, if I were one of your listeners that wants to try something, and remember the last time that you had mental clarity around a topic when you were emotional. It may have been something you got really upset with, somebody that sent you a message that you didn't like, or somebody that really pushed your buttons. But somehow you decided to stop and get some mental clarity. I would do a lot more of whatever you were doing. On the converse of that, Denise, what I would do is say the last time I picked up my phone without even thinking and I sent a text, or I did something impetuous, what is it I can do to stop that next time and be aware of it? And by the way, there is no human that isn't susceptible to this. No human. I mean, and I just believe that you've got to figure out, you've got to come up with a tempo and a symbol or a process that helps you get that mental clarity. And that's why we say it might only be a couple seconds and it might be a night of sleep, but whatever that is for you, you've got to do it. You've got to figure that out. So my unfortunate answer to you is I don't have the exact things to do, but I know it's within each human to do it. I know it. We've done it. You just got to replicate it.
So that's great. I think it's a very personalized model. It's telling the person, you need to figure out what works for you, and don't assume what works for person X is going to work for person Y.
Exactly.
So what about a person in an organization whose leader doesn't pause, and they're next in the organization and they're asked to do things that are causing stress, and they don't want to leave, they would like to stay with their job. What are some strategies that they have to either influence their leader to change or to accept that their leader won't change, and ways that they can deal with it?
Yeah, I think it is the question, because deciding to leave an organization, if that's the only solution, I mean, that's just horrible if you think about just the tectonic shift that causes in your life, your family, and others, if that's the only way out. So there are those situations where I think that has to happen. I think just for your own mental health, there are people that just have to say, I can't do this anymore. And we heard from these people in our exit interviews. But there are a large number of us that have it within ourselves, our own mental control, to not react in the same way that our superiors reacted to us. And so let me tell you what I mean by that. If you get something, especially from a leader that doesn't have their own control, the first thing you should do is find your own way to pause before you respond back. Because if you think about Newton's third law of motion, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If that's the case, and that's you, you're just making it, you're amplifying it. Second is that, yes, you have to figure out how to work with a person that has that kind of impetuous behavior, but don't spread it. Back to my contagion effect, find a way to dampen it right there yourself. And you'll get some relief out of that right off the bat. And then third is what I would advocate for 99% of people, is to develop a clear message and go talk to the leader that's causing it and let them know the impact they're having on you. And I realize that takes courage, and I realize that that's not realistic for some situations. I realize that. But if I were causing stress to you today and you were working for me, I am the type of leader. I'd love for you to tell me what I'm doing and why it's changing. And I would say that shame on both of us if we didn't have that conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to come and let me know what's going on, and I need to decide that my action is having that cause of your reaction. So it's complex. At the same time, like we said, you have complete control over one thing, how you respond and react to others, and that includes your boss or the person that's causing you the stress, friends, spouses, others. So get control over that. It'll change your life. I'm pretty sure of it.
Right. And sometimes it goes higher in the organization. So your manager's okay, but your manager's dealing with the stress from their manager, their manager's manager. I'm trying to get our lights back on. There we go.
I think the worst thing in the world is, in my opinion, is a mid-level manager that's getting it from both directions, right? You're getting this hounded from the top, and your life is not fun. You're trying to, advance your own career. And at the same time, you've got employees that are saying, hey, what's going on? And it's just, those are tough roles to play if that's the situation and the culture that you're working in.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about you as an elite masters track athlete. And because I think about people in the corporate world who are on this track and they want to go fast and they want to go fast. And they think the only way to go fast is to cause a lot of commotion in their organizations in order to get things done. We want things done yesterday.
Yes.
So how do you, as a elite track athlete, can you give us a parallel on what to do?
Yeah, well, what that really means is that I'm an old person that runs. So I want you to know that. So I would not want your audience to think, oh my gosh. So the only way for me to run faster in the races that I enter is to prepare more, especially as I get older, to do more preparation, especially around exercise and therapies and others for my body and my mind. And I think there's a parallel here, is that if you want to go faster, you have to have a discipline to prepare so you can do so. If all I did is run without any other preparation, I just go slow. I would actually get injured. All kinds of things would be catastrophic from that perspective. So there are parallels. And the unfortunate part for us, Denise, is that the models that we see from billionaire entrepreneurs and movie stars and others is that they never stop. Their lives are so full and so amazing, and they're traveling the world. They're doing Ironman races, reading 100 books a year. Well, none of that is true. None of that is true. I have data that will prove that that's not the case, but that's what we see. And unfortunately, the longer we try to replicate that, the more stress we drive into our own lives, because we're unfulfilled, because we're not doing what that we see on TV or listen to on podcasts. So I think if you can pause and develop and have a routine that helps you get that mental clarity, it will change so many things in your life. And that's the parallel I have as an athlete, is I'm more prepared when I step on the track now. And I'm getting better as I get older at that. So good. Thank you for that question. That's kind of fun.
Well, and it's all about being your best self, not comparing yourself to others and the stress of doing that and to some unrealistic expectation that you talked about, that it seems like they're doing this, and this, but they're really not.
They're not. So there's a whole study that Harvard did on the top performing CEOs, and I don't want to go into a depth of it, but what the study came out and showed is that they sleep just as much as the rest of us. All these, exceptional people, they watch just as much TV as the rest of us. They have the same needs and wants as the rest of us. That they're called personas, and we actually wrote about them. They're called demigods, right? The persona is a demigod. I'm really not all human. I don't need sleep. I do all these amazing things, and none of it's true. It's all PR. Come back to the rest of
it. Fascinating that, it really gives you pause for thinking about who you are and what you need to do and how to react.
Yes.
And so as we talk to our future, our up and coming HR leaders, what would be the one or two things you want to leave them with as we wrap up this interview?
Well, first of all, I'm in love with the profession. My role at the Association for Talent Development, I've been on the board and the chair now for 7 years. And the people leading human resources across this country, in my opinion, have tools that we've never had before around data, assessment, technology, and others to reach multiple people. We didn't have that in the past. We always had to be face-to-face. So that's something I think that we can start looking at. What mechanisms do we have to start helping reduce stress? I would love for the HR leaders to get this issue to the boardroom, to look at performance relative to stress, to look at performance relative to the use of technology, to look at performance relative to people's lives that exist past the office. In other words, the one thing we saw with stress is that it's not an office issue. It starts there in great ways, but it permeates the family, people's lives, the way they see the world, the way they think, their fear, and that's real. So if we're going to develop human capital and talent and drive our organizations to higher performance, we've got to start paying attention to this. And that's what I'd love the HR profession to pick up on.
Charles, thank you. That was a great way to end it.
Great.
And a good advice for those in HR and how they can help with this really stressful and serious issue.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Well, I want to once again thank you for being here today, and I want to speak out to our HR Studio podcast listeners for a moment. If you are not a subscriber yet to HR Studio Podcast, you can become one by going to hrstudiopodcast.com. You'll get notified of new episodes. Also there you'll find all of our speakers' social handles and contact information, show notes, and more about Charles's book, latest book. And speaking of which, he has graciously offered to send a copy of his latest book, which again is the 24-hour rule, leading in a frenetic world, to one of our lucky HR Studio Podcast subscribers. So once again, thank you, Charles, and wishing you a wonderful Labor Day weekend. And enjoy Colorado, and we will hope you stress soon. Have a de-stressed weekend.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
You as well.
Thank you for listening to the HR Studio Podcast. To download complimentary resources from this week's episode and to catch up on past episodes, please visit hrstudiopodcast.com. Subscribe to the HR Studio podcast list and social channels while there to receive alerts and recaps on all our episodes. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates. For over 35 years, AJO has built its reputation on experienced listening, exceptional quality, and caring partnerships, delivering in 30 states and 20 countries. To learn more and subscribe to AJO's Top 100 HR blog, visit us at ajoconnor.com.